everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very special webinar. My name is Pam Seeger, and I am a Portfolio Academic Administrator at K12 Stride. I'm joined today by renowned speaker, Gen Z activist, and author Brandon Farbstein. With his mission to elevate empathy, Brandon was named Instagram's 19 under 19 as one of the most influential young people in the world. And most recently, LinkedIn recognized Brandon as a top voice in disability advocacy. Hi, Brandon, and thank you so much for being here today for this very important conversation. We are excited to see you and hear you on Life Beyond Bullying. Welcome.
Hello, K12 community. Thank you so much for being here, having me, and for the privilege of your time. In the next few minutes, I not only want to share a little bit of my story and my experience to what got me here, but also the tools that are, quite frankly, universal for us all, no matter what we are going through, how to empower ourselves to feel 10 feet tall and be the greatest version of ourselves. And here's a little bit about how I was able to do just that. What you might not be able to tell right now on camera, because, you know, I'm on a screen in front of you, I stand at 3'9", and this is the size that I'm going to be for the rest of my life, quite frankly. So growing up, when I was younger, didn't really notice that there was much of a difference because the height differential between me and my peers wasn't really that noticeable. But as I got older and they got taller and taller, the more and more I realized, I'm not like the others around me. And that was more so amplified when I realized how rare my condition really is. There are only 84 cases in medical history that have been diagnosed with my specific condition. And if you think about it, that's crazy. So many people have been in medical books and seen by doctors and had diagnoses, but to have only 84 in the world in history, what it means is a life of uncertainty. I didn't really know what the next chapter or phase of life was going to bring. But at first, it didn't really faze me that much. As you can probably see on the screen, I was a pretty happy looking kid. This was me at 8 years old when I had my second pretty extensive set of leg surgeries. And that probably was one of the moments that I think I started questioning quite a bit. Why am I going through this? Why do I have to deal with these sorts of things? Why is everyone staring at me? But the question that constantly lingered in my mind was, why me? Why do I have to be the one that deals with this? Why is life always so painful? And unfortunately, I reached a point where I didn't want to be here anymore. At 11 years old, I came very close to ending my life. And quite frankly, that was a huge catalyst that showed me that I couldn't handle this alone. And of course, it was in a moment of feeling like I was in this dark hole and I didn't have any ladder to get up out of it. But really, that's what therapy and counseling did for me. It showed me that I didn't have to carry this burden constantly with me. And not only did it save my life, but it gave me a new perspective and outlook on the life that I had. And I think that was really what propelled me to realize, you know what, maybe you have something that you can use to help others. That's where one thing can change everything. One moment, one conversation, one chance encounter that you have with somebody. We tend to get so caught up with life moving like a million miles an hour, that oftentimes we get distracted of the people and the opportunities around us. And sometimes those opportunities or those missed connections can be individuals that can kind of change the trajectory of your life. People often say to us, especially as young people, that we probably shouldn't talk to strangers. But what if I told you that meeting a stranger can literally change the direction of the journey that you have? Well, this was that moment for me. I want you to take a look. When I was 2, I was diagnosed with an extremely rare form of dwarfism, metatropic dysplasia. It was in this moment, at 15 years old, that I shared my story for the very first time. And it was a pretty cool way to do so on a TED Talk. But the way that that happened, I was in the airport with my family, and it was just kind of a random trip. We were traveling down to visit relatives in Florida, and a woman saw me on my mobility device, which you probably saw in that clip, was this really cool looking like Segway, Lamborghini, Transformer looking sort of thing. So it drew a lot of attention, and people would often come up to me and ask, what is this device? What do you use it for? What condition do you have? What's your name? Yada, yada, just being very inquisitive. And that day was no exception. I remember being in line at security waiting to go through the metal detector, and a woman came up to me, and again, the same slew of questions. What is that cool device? What condition do you have? What's your name? And she was just very curious, and I was fine with that. I could tell she didn't have any sort of ill intentions behind that. She just wanted to know more about me. And I thought that kind of was the end of it. We talked for a couple of minutes and then went our separate ways. But turns out she was on our flight. So we ended up sitting at the gate together and finishing that conversation for another 45 minutes. And turns out this woman was one of the original people in the world to put on a TEDx event. I think she was number 3 globally, and it was called TEDx NASA. NASA, you probably all know, is the famous space agency here in the US. So that was a pretty epic thing that definitely, I think, kind of lit a light bulb off in my head. How sick would it be to give a TED Talk? And funny enough, I remember specifically saying that very thing to my mom a few months before that, because we would always watch TED Talks after school. I just was so intrigued by them. And really, it wasn't up until that one moment that I had the opportunity for the very first time to come out as me and share just 6 minutes of my journey. But quite literally, those 6 minutes turned into the rest of my life, because it was in that moment that I found my purpose and a mission that was so much bigger than myself. But more importantly, what I discovered in those 6 minutes was how important it is to share your authenticity with others. Quite frankly, it's everything. People are always going to remember how we made them feel. They may not remember exactly what we did for them, the gift that we gave, et cetera, et cetera. But the feeling that we instilled in them is something that I promise you they will carry with them. And again, at 15, I discovered that firsthand, because I was, quite frankly, this kid, and I didn't know how people were going to respond to me. But at the end of that talk, I had people in suits that were 40, 50 years older than me with tears in their eyes, saying, "You unlocked something within me that I didn't even know I had buried within," or "That was the most amazing talk I've ever heard." Whatever that specific thing was, I just was so amazed that my story could make a difference in somebody else's life. And what I spoke about wasn't necessarily just having dwarfism or this unique journey that I've been on. It was that we all need to innovate our own solution and recognize that none of us are going to have a roadmap that is laid out in front of us saying, go to that step, and then you're going to achieve that. We all kind of know the reality of things. That's not how it works. Instead, we have to be able to figure out what works for us. Being our own individual person and recognizing that we can't follow somebody else's path. We could absolutely be inspired and empowered by it. But if we try and compare our chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 17, it's probably not going to end well. And I could tell you that from experience. So being able to innovate your own solution really is just the ability to go through life and recognize I'm in the driver's seat. I have to figure things out for myself. Obviously, surround myself with a support system. That's part of innovating your own solution too. But really, that was the message that resonated so much with people. And what was really interesting was I thought my TED Talk was going to make things a little bit, I don't know, easier, better with my peers at high school. But unfortunately, it was the very opposite of that. I'm sure, quite frankly, every single one of you listening right now can relate to having the highest high, the wave that comes in that brings you just absolutely unstoppable energy, where you make the sports team, you ask the girl or boy out that you've been wanting to go on a date with, whatever that thing is. Everything is happening for you. But then the next wave comes, and unfortunately, it knocks everything down. It's kind of what happened to me. Starting the very first week of my freshman year of high school, I remember seeing a tweet that was a video of me on my Segway mobility device. And the caption read, "First person to punt the midget off the Segway gets $5. And not only was the fact that it was literally me in the hallway of my school on the mobility device that kind of caught me off guard, but it was retweeted and liked by hundreds of my peers. Many of who I didn't know, they didn't know me. They just saw the fact that there was a freshman who clearly looked different. And that was unfortunately what my experience was, just the tip of the iceberg, because it then led to the most vile and vicious language that you can imagine. Some things like, "Midget, why don't you just kill yourself? You're the ugliest person I've ever seen. No one is ever going to love you." Just want you to imagine being in the position of opening up Instagram and seeing that you have like 14 new notifications. And every single notification is either a new picture, a comment, something that you're tagged in that completely degrades and humiliates you. Unfortunately, my peers in my school created multiple fake Instagram accounts throughout my tenure at that high school. And it got to the point where, as you can imagine, every aspect of my life was affected. I couldn't go normally throughout my days and be able to manage in a way that I had to. I couldn't do my schoolwork. I was not able to keep up with my friends. Just all of the things that was normal, I was not able to do. So needless to say, I made a drastic decision to get myself out of that environment and do something with that experience. I want you to take a look.
Virginia teen says he was relentlessly bullied by classmates. His experience now the inspiration behind legislation signed at the state capitol today. Capitol Bureau reporter Evan Armour shares his story.
He says the teasing and threats were so bad, it made it hard to focus in school. Now, schools are adding something to the curriculum aimed at preventing situations like this.
Brandon Farbstein says cyberbullying changed his life.
For me, bullying really was severe.
Today, he walks the halls of government buildings, but just a few years ago, it was school hallways.
To walk into an environment where you're surrounded by 1,500 kids and any one of them could be the perpetrator, it really puts you in a state of terror.
He says his rare form of dwarfism was the subject of that bullying, but also his motivation to enact change. He helped inspire Delegate Eileen Fillercorn's House Bill 45, which Governor Ralph Northam signed today as Farbstein looked on.
This so very easily could have been my downfall, the reason why everything stopped right in front of me. But instead, I chose to do something with my story and realized that I certainly was not the only one going through this situation of not only being bullied and victimized, but having nothing being done about it. The crazy part was that we went to the administration, we went to the police department, especially when these threats got pretty severe. And unfortunately, time and time again, we were met with the same answer. There's nothing that we can do. And I did not let that become something that I just sat with, because it really infuriated me, as you can probably imagine. And so what I chose to do was testify and share my story with the Virginia General Assembly, the governing body in the state of Virginia, where I grew up. And to my surprise, I was able to get 2 pieces of legislation passed by the time that I turned 18. One on bullying prevention that requires every school administrator within the state to alert parents within 5 days of any bullying incident. One of those things between you and I, it still kind of infuriates me that this has to be a law, and it's not common sense and common practice, but unfortunately it has to be mandated because, as my family and I saw, we had no support from the administration. But the law that I'm most proud of was where we had to pass the curriculum requirement of every single classroom across the state, K-12, needs to be taught emotional intelligence, empathy, social and emotional learning, things that really equip young people with the tools to know their power and to know that their words matter as well. And really that empathy component is so fundamentally important, because I saw firsthand that it was really the lack of empathy that caused these incidents to happen in the first place. If somebody knew before pressing send, post, whatever, that there was somebody on the other side of that screen, and their words, whether for the better or for the worse, are going to make an impact on that person's day. Quite frankly, it's empathy that makes us stop in our tracks and has that internal question that we always have to ask: is this worth it? Do I really want to put this energy out there? Because quite frankly, we may not know what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. But empathy is also that component that allows us to connect and say, you know what, I may not know what it's like to be in that exact experience. I may not know what it's like to lose my dad. I may not know what it's like to XYZ, but I want to be here with you. I want to support you in any way that I can. That's that empathy component. And it's so often taught to us that we have to treat others the same way we want to be treated, right? And I don't disagree with that at all. But I think there's another component that needs to be added on to that. It's how we treat ourselves. We're never really taught empathy towards ourselves, or how to positively speak, you know, when the voice inside of our head is saying, you're ugly, you're not enough, you're going to fail, who do you think you are? Empathy is that ability to stop that voice in your head. Say, I know I'm not perfect, but I am me and I'm enough. And I have these awesome gifts with it inside me. And so I think it's that component that we really have to be aware of, especially knowing the power that social media and technology plays, because we may not know what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes or their situation. But do we really want to be a part of adding to their day for, in terms of the negative and making it worse? Or do we want to be just a little bit of positivity and light in their life? And it doesn't take much to do that. We all have this innate ability to use what we've been given, to speak up, use our voice, and be the change. And that's really what I chose to do at 17 and 18. I want to reiterate the fact that I wasn't some big Instagram influencer. I didn't have all these followers. I didn't have connections. Like, I was literally just a teenager that had this experience happen to him. And I knew that it wasn't right. I knew that I wasn't the only one going through something like this. And as a result of it, I got 2 laws literally passed in Virginia. And to this day, at 24, I still can't really get over that. But I think it shows us all, no matter what happens to us or what life throws at us, it's really up to us to use that. And I'm not saying that we all have to be an advocate or a motivational speaker or doing, this sort of thing at all. But sometimes it's really just sharing your story with somebody else, somebody that you trust and love. You would be so amazed how much of a difference that in itself can make. Because when we are ourselves, we encourage other people to do the same. On that point, it really matters so much how we show up in the world, in the words that we use, and really, it matters to be us. And what I mean by that, going back to my last point, when we show up as ourselves in the world with all the quirkiness, all of the weirdness, all of the us that makes us us. I'm trying to be proper English here. Really, we encourage other people to do the same thing for themselves. And I think that's one of the most powerful gifts that we can share with others. Literally, it's being ourselves. And sometimes it's really hard to do that, especially in a world where people don't celebrate every bit of who we are and the identities that we come to the table with. But that's where you have to celebrate yourself. You have to know that you inherently are enough and worthy just as you are. And you don't need anybody's permission in order to show up in the world. I think I learned that firsthand during the pandemic, because life kind of paused in a lot of ways. I wasn't constantly on the road and having all these people around me on planes all the time, yada, yada. And what that really required me to do was take a look inside my head and ask myself, how am I treating this person that I see in the mirror every single day? What is the voice inside my head saying? Am I really showing up as myself? And what that allowed me to do, I think, is just take a step back and realize, you know what, I was born with this unique set of cards, or this unique hand of cards. I think you get what I'm trying to point to, for a reason, to show people that you don't necessarily need to be confined or defined by any life circumstance or diagnosis or thing that happens to you, any of that. Like, we get to set the definition of ourselves. And the more that I realized that, the more the world kind of responded in pretty amazing ways. And instead of me trying to explain that to you, I would rather just show you what that looks like. So it may have been hard to tell in terms of the context, but that was my modeling debut. And again, it was during the pandemic, so things were a little bit different, but that actually was for New York Fashion Week. I wore Tommy Hilfiger Adaptive, which is an amazing adaptive line of clothing for people with disabilities. And we kind of all had to film our own individual things. So it literally was like my camera guy and me, and I had to hype myself up and whatever. But that was the result. I think I did a pretty good job. So needless to say, when you are yourself and you show up as the most you version that there is, the world responds in such amazing ways. Never would I have imagined myself being a model for New York Fashion Week. Never would I have imagined myself in the other slew of things that I've been able to do in the last few years. But I think it's a direct result of me standing in my truth and my power and showing others that you could do the same thing and have an amazing life, no matter who you are or how you are. And with that, one of the things that I really wanted to focus on was releasing something that helped the younger version of me, that didn't have really anyone to look up to, any sort of representation, that sort of thing. And I decided to release a kid's book. It's called A Kid's Book About Self-Love, and it teaches what it means to celebrate your uniqueness and see the awesomeness that exists within us all. And more so, what I really wanted to hone in on is the fact that we are not what happens to us. We're not our accomplishments. We're not our failures. We are who we are at the end of the day. In fact, I say, you're not your grades. You're not your performance. You're not what you do. You're who you are. And that message is one that I really want to hone in on. Because obviously, all of those things are important. Getting good grades and having a good academic presence and all of the things that we need to do as, good citizens and whatnot. I'm not negating any of that. But at the end of the day, you are who you are. None of those things define you. None of those things are going to ultimately set the trajectory of the life that you are on. If you don't make the soccer team, your life isn't over. If you get an F on a quiz, your life isn't over. If your prom date suddenly says, I don't want anything to do with you, your life is not over. So really, it's what we focus on that kind of grows and has somewhat of a presence in our life. And what I mean by that, what we focus on is quite frankly going to be what we feel. And so if we can realize, if we filter who we follow, not just on social media, of course, making sure that you're intentional about those that you choose to focus on and consume their content. Are they doing anything for your life in terms of, are they pushing you to be a better person, to be funnier, to be, XYZ, whatever that is? I'm not saying you have to follow like only positivity accounts, like good quotes and whatever, obviously not. But we all probably could think of at least one or two people, whether we know them personally or just accounts in general, that post garbage. They're constantly complaining, they're bringing others down, they're berating whoever they can, like that sort of thing. I could tell you from experience, once again, it's not going to do anything for your life. Anything good, I should say. So the more that we could be aware of the fact that, if we're pouring our energy into somebody that clearly doesn't give that back to us or doesn't give us the same sort of support that we give them, then maybe we shouldn't have them in our life. I'm not saying we have to like totally ghost people, but it's really our discretion where our energy goes. And something that I've been so intentional of the last few years is just realizing that energy and time is not infinite. It's something that we only have a certain amount of. And it's truly up to every single one of us how we use that energy and how we spend our time on a daily basis. So the last thing that I want to leave you with that kind of sums up the last few minutes really is the fact that your thoughts control your life. We have to move like the waves and realize that there are going to be highs and lows that happen to us. But we have to be able to respond in a way that we keep going, quite frankly. Your thoughts control everything. Whether you choose to do something, how you choose to do it, the way that you show up, like all of these different aspects. So just being aware of that voice inside your head, I promise you, it makes an absolutely astronomical difference in your life. And maybe that means starting therapy or talking to somebody, counseling. I promise you, being able to unpack what's inside of your head and not trying to carry that with you all the time, that in itself also makes just the biggest difference in feeling like you're free and you could walk through life. Because quite frankly, when we're able to do that, not only does the world respond in pretty extraordinary ways, but really we become the biggest version of who we are, the greatest person of really who we were meant to be. And that's how we become 10 feet tall. Here's what that looks like.
I swear I could touch the sky. I'm 10 feet tall. I'm 10 feet tall.
K12, it has been my biggest honor to be here with you today. And the last question that I will leave you with, where will being your youest you take you? Thank you so much. And I would love to bring Pam back on and spend the next little bit answering any questions that you all might have.
So, Brandon, thank you so much. I mean, that was so inspiring. I absolutely loved at the end you jumping out of that plane and just, it was so inspirational. Thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate that you talked about those really effective skills that we need in life. Every single person needs in life. I call them the 16 habits. You really talked about understanding, listening to understand, having empathy toward others. You also talked about the power of representation and how you want to help young people, especially those who feel othered or different, to be empowered.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit more about what you mean by that and how we can help others to feel empowered?
I love this question. So representation to me, really, I don't think I realized how important it was up until more recently. And it's the power of knowing that you can aspire to be greater than you ever imagined, or realizing that no matter who you are, what your challenges may be, you're able to still achieve. And that's really the power of representation. And as a kid, and even now to this current day, the lack of representation when it comes to people with disabilities, but more specifically, those with dwarfism, how most of the times in TV and movies, you see these very degrading characters like elves and Oompa Loompas and things that are kind of subhuman. And a lot of people equate those with dwarfism to those characters, unfortunately. And so if we have this total lack of understanding to make people aware that I'm simply a human being, I'm just smaller than the average person, it really makes a difference. And I live that every single day in the way that people respond to me, either hyper focused on me and like staring at me so intently as I walk through Trader Joe's or wherever I'm going, or they choose to not acknowledge me and not make eye contact and kind of ignore me. So it's very interesting to see how it plays out in the world. But yeah, really, so much of what I do now is around that representation piece. And I think what we all can do is empower those around us to be themselves and encourage them to show up as they are. You know, again, especially in a society where we're constantly being told you have to do this specific thing in order to achieve this specific result. I think one example of that is going to college. A lot of Gen Z, I think, do go to college, but they also realize that you don't necessarily need to follow this one path in order to get set up in life. And I'm also an example of that. So just kind of being your own unique self and encouraging young people to do that is very important.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have to say, I think it's challenging for young people, especially, to be able to answer that question, who am I? You know, what do I, how do I want others to view me, to see me, to
Yeah,
how do I want to be represented? And one thing
right.
that I really appreciate is that you tied that in with empathy. So I want to explore that a little bit more with you, because we hear so many times that we need to be empathetic. We need to be empaths toward others.
Hmm.
Something very unique, though, that you shared today is that we need to have empathy toward ourselves.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit more about that? And then maybe as, you know, people, even as adults who can be instrumental, integral in a child's life, how can we encourage that?
Yeah, really, it's that ability to recognize that empathy is something that quite literally starts with us. It's how we treat ourselves on a daily basis. Literally, the voice that's inside of our head, what is it saying to us? Is it empowering? Is it saying, you can do this, you've got this, that sort of thing? Or is it the opposite direction, saying, you're not good enough, you're never going to get anything, that sort of thing? And that's also where self care, I think, plays in so fundamentally. Oftentimes it's a buzzword, you know, hashtag self care. And like we equate that with, I don't know, sunbathing or taking a bubble bath. And I love all those things as well. But I think real self care is giving yourself the ability to pause and recognize when you're about to enter a state of overwhelm. And honestly, it's giving yourself that gift of not stepping into that state. And what that means is doing a mindfulness exercise. There are amazing apps like Headspace or Calm, hashtag not sponsored, by the way, but I would love that sponsorship. That, you know, really give you just easy, quick tools that literally take 5 minutes, 10 minutes that you could do before school, before work, vice versa, after school, after work. And I could tell you from the life that I live, you have to give that pause to yourself, because if not, life is just so hectic and you don't really. No, I think also you can get lost in other people's ideas of what they want you to be or what you think society expects you to be. And you're so right, Pam. It's really hard to identify that question, who am I and what do I want? How do I want to show up in the world? But I think empathy is a way that you're able to do so by giving yourself the same love and support that you give to others. Quite frankly, we are the only friend that we are going to have from the day we're born up until the day that we die. And that's something that I think about so often. You are literally completely in charge of how you treat yourself. And so if you let that voice get carried away, it's going to prevent you from showing up as your USU and your best self, quite frankly.
I could not agree more. And I really like that you say the USU get caught in a rabbit hole, because you know, there are bullies in life. We experience them regardless of where we are, regardless of what situation. It could be a brick and mortar, it could be in a cyber, it could be in the work environment, it could be in a grocery store, it could be anywhere. You know, it can be heart heartbreaking and heartfelt to fall into that hole of negativity, but you've been
Yeah.
able to embrace it, and you've been able to affect change, and to really work through the obstacles that were in front of you, that degradation that you felt, that dehumanization that you felt sadly from peers.
Yeah.
So with that, what do you think is the most challenging obstacle to changing one's mindset, whether that's internally about themselves or how they accept and perceive others? And do you have advice for someone who does want to change their mindset but really is struggling with how to do so?
It's a great question. I'd say the biggest problem is that we often get in our own way and are our biggest enemy and self sabotage in ways that only we know how to. And that's where I, again, could not hit more on therapy and counseling and the importance of it for, quite frankly, every single person. We don't need to be in a place of feeling overwhelmed or being very anxious or depressed in order to start therapy. It's really that ability to kind of unpack what we are going through and not get carried away by that. Pam, what was the second part of your question?
Oh, and then based on that, if people are struggling with that, what
Mm,
advice do you have for someone who's really trying to change their mindset, but is just really having a difficult time doing that?
yeah, it really, the biggest piece of advice I would say is to talk to somebody, and more specifically, talk to somebody that can really support you through what you are experiencing. Again, whether that's a mental health professional, or if you're a young person, talking to a parent, talking to an adult that you trust. It's sometimes that first step that I really think can be the hardest, but also the most exhilarating, the most freeing, when we realized, holy moly, I don't need to carry this all inside me anymore. And again, like, that can really just be all of this weight suddenly off of your shoulders so that you can walk through life with your head held high and the way that you need to, not being held down by any of those things that might have happened in the past.
Absolutely. And when you do feel weighed down, I mean, you feel oppressed, you feel as though there's no hope, and
Yeah,
and that's obviously not what we want. We want people to feel hopeful, to love. We want people to be able to love who they
yeah,
are from within, right? Because that emulates out. So
absolutely.
what do you so just continuing this conversation about empathy though, and kindness and love and acceptance, what do you say especially to students who really may not have that positive role model in their lives, who can really teach them about these principles, about these critical life effective skill sets?
This is where I think we are one of the most equipped generations, if not the most equipped, to be able
Mhm.
to give ourselves the tools that nobody else handed to us. What I mean by that is YouTube and social media sometimes can be the absolute greatest classrooms. And again, I love conventional learning, and I'm not negating any of the things that we need to do in terms of like classwork and homework and all those things. But I do think it just shows us that there is another way, and to have that positive force in your life, even if they aren't there in person, whether that's through a
Mhm.
podcast, it's through a interview series on YouTube. I kind of umbrella it in personal development, and there's just so much to explore. And I think honestly that really was one of the keys for me past the therapy and counseling point, because that only did so much to kind of equip me with the mindset that I have. It really was personal development that gave me that extra step, and the tools, like being able to kind of reframe things and realize you can't change other people around you. You can't change how they respond, but you could always choose your thoughts. You could always choose how you show up. And that really, again, was the gift that personal development gave me as a teenager. And I couldn't recommend it enough because it's literally free and accessible and available to literally every single one of us. We just need to give ourselves the time to want to learn and expand our mind and even hear people that we may not conventionally hear from, so that we're able to get, of course, a perspective that is different, is unique, and could even give us a new way of life.
And I really appreciate all of the different options that you have that you can offer and express and then give advice to in order to find those positive connections. Because just as you said, it might not be that physical person that's sitting or standing right beside you. It could be that podcast. It could be them listening to you. It could be people listening to you right now,
Yeah,
that are moved and touched and really find it within themselves that wow, I need to step up. I need to step up my own self-care, my own internal love, so that I can be better for myself and then in turn be better for others, which
100%.
then
And
infectious
really,
we then.
that's the power also of social media,
Mhm.
because we don't necessarily need to be next to somebody in order to feel a connection with them. Honestly, some of my closest friends live on the other side of the country, the other side of the world. Obviously, I'm not with them on a weekly basis or like more than a couple times a year even. But again, hold on one sec. Sorry, that was the emergency alert going off on my phone. But that's the power of being able to just open yourself up and have technology be an amazing presence in our life.
Absolutely, could not agree more. And so you just recently had a birthday.
I
So,
did.
first, happy recent birthday to you.
Thank
I
you.
don't know if you would be comfortable to share how old you are now,
Yeah, of
what you
course.
did on your
24.
birthday to make it, yeah, 24 years old. What you did for your own self care on your birthday, because that's important. And then, as you think back about your life so far to date, what is the absolute biggest lesson that you think you've learned about either yourself or life to this point that you can share with others?
Mm. Well, how I spent my birthday, interestingly enough, it was like literally all around self care. I did a whole lot of nothing, which to a lot of people would be like very boring. But when you live a life as like chaotic and hectic as mine, it is very rare that you have those moments of just being able to kind of chill and not have a whole list of things that you need to check off your priority list or whatever. So I literally just relaxed. I watched a couple of movies. I ordered pad thai, which is one of
Mm.
my favorite foods, and yeah, I did my thing, which was quite enjoyable. I would say the biggest lesson that life has taught me. Hmm. I would probably say that you are more equipped to handle life than you think. And what I mean by that is like looking back at things and recognizing how much we collectively, me, you, have been able to overcome in our life and still be here. I find that pretty remarkable. And I also think that's not any sort of mistake or coincidence. And we clearly have an incredible amount of resilience inside of us. And that's time and time again, I think what life has taught me, that you're going to be met with adversity. You're going to be met with things that make you feel like, life is totally overwhelming, but you're going to be able to handle it, even if you think in the moment it's too much. And again, I just think that's been such a through line for me. And if you could think about it in your own journey as well, I bet it would be very similar to you as well, because just the amount of resilience that we've all had to overcome and have in order to get right where we are is pretty astounding.
Oh, regardless of who we are, regardless of
Yes,
where we come from, or
exactly.
I could not agree more. Brandon, we have a couple of questions from the audience. One that really is deeply heartfelt and personal. What if you're confused about who you are? What do you do then?
Mm, really love this question. Uh, to be fully honest with you, I still am confused about who I am in a lot of ways too. I think one of the gifts about being young is the fact that we get to figure things out right now. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to have everything planned out or whatever. We just need to be able to be where our feet are, as I like to say. And you have to just know that, the voice that is inside of you telling you, this is where I want to be, or this is who I want to be, this is how I want to be. That, in a lot of ways, is who you really are. And you have to be able to listen to that voice and follow where your intuition is telling you. I'm not saying it's gonna like give you this whole magical clarity as to like, oh, my purpose is this, and like I'm gonna end up in this city when I grow up. Like, obviously, unfortunately, none of us have a crystal ball, but yeah, I think it just makes a profound difference in kind of overall how we handle life and how we treat ourselves.
Right. And it's okay to be confused. We're human, right? It's okay to be confused about where we are in this particular
Yeah.
moment because, something could change today or tomorrow and it brings us that light, that source that really allows us to open up and accept who we are and really acceptance I would find would be so key and feeling not so confused, just being able to say, you know what, no matter what, I'm going to love myself because I'm worth it.
Yeah, and I'm me, and that deserves to be celebrated too.
The youest you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another question came in here. This is a very serious question. So, what should I do if a bully is threatening to hurt me?
Mm. First off, you need to share with an adult in your school and your parents or whoever is at home with you. You definitely need to share with them as well. Uh, I could tell you firsthand from the level of fear going into school every single day and not knowing who the people were that were sending those messages. That was pretty overwhelming and intense. And I could only imagine having that level of threat in addition to the fear that you already would have. So don't carry it with you. Please share with somebody at your school or at home so that they can help you. You don't deserve to be going through that. And quite frankly, the other person needs to understand that it's not okay either. So you speaking up and saying something is not only helping yourself, but it ultimately helps the other person too.
What do you say in return if they do go to someone else and they have that worry, that fear that there's going to be retaliation from reaching out for help or support?
I think understanding that people initially may have a response of being annoyed or being upset because they don't understand that what they're doing is wrong. So I think that's very real, but from my experience as well, if you don't stop it, then it's only going to get worse. And until we are kind of the people to break the cycle, then it just keeps going and going and going. And it may not be the easiest thing at first, but I promise you, it is so worth it to break the cycle and to stop this from happening over and over again.
And Brandon, that goes back to what you said before. It fits perfectly in line to what you said. It's about having love and empathy toward ourselves. And if you do, then you've got to be able to understand that you have to stand up for yourself
Yeah,
and just not allow that abuse to continue.
exactly.
And another question, very specific question. So, do you have any advice for a special needs student coping with the after effects of bullying?
Hmm. Well, I would say being able to show up with as much support and empathy as you can during that time is incredibly important for that student. But really having them really hone in on their self care, their acceptance of themselves, being able to celebrate that as well, especially when they have a disability. Personally, I don't like the term special needs, but I think that is something that can be incredibly important in terms of them feeling supported, them feeling like there is somebody that is here for me that actually cares about what I'm going through and doesn't just say that they care or doing the bare minimum. And that really can be the difference between somebody feeling like they have somebody or feeling like they're on a deserted island and have nobody around. And you literally can make that difference. I'm talking to both the educators, but I'm also talking to students. It doesn't have to be somebody that you are, in class with conventionally and passing in a hallway. It could be somebody that you know on social media, and you reach out because they may not have a lot of friends. They may not have a lot of people that do say hi to them. And what if you were that person that says, "Hey, just wanted to say what's up. What are you up to?" Something so simple. You would be absolutely amazed how much of a difference that would make in somebody else's life. And I'm not just talking about whether they have a disability or not. I'm talking about anybody that feels alone or invisible. We can literally be the difference of them feeling worthy, them feeling like maybe somebody does care about me. Maybe I'm not alone. And it could be us literally just saying hi. So, if nothing else, I want you to really just remember how much power your words and your actions have on a daily basis. We can be the difference of somebody feeling like they don't want to be here anymore versus, you know what, life is worth living.
Absolutely, it is. Thank you so much for saying that. Brandon, is there anything that, or the best way that people can follow you, can stay connected to you after listening to you today? How would you suggest that
Yeah, if
they
we
follow up
could,
on?
Shane and Steve, throw that slide on that says connect with me. Hopefully, you guys can see that on the screen. But my social medias are just my name, Brandon Farbstein. I hang out on Instagram the most, and that is my last name at Farbstein, Farbstein. Same with Facebook and LinkedIn, or my website, which has both of my books on there as well.
Well, Brandon, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and this invaluable insight with us today. And as well as thank you to everyone joining us today. Thank you for your participation, for all the questions that you had come in. Please keep the conversation going on Facebook. Use the handle at Stride K12. And please don't forget to join us for our next webinar next Wednesday, same time, same place. Thank you. And thank you so much, Brandon.
Thanks, Pam. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.